Hi, everyone. I'm not sure exactly what you see right now because Josh and I are here together on Zoom figuring this out for the first time. But I'm sure that you see some pictures of stars, and I'm sure that that will remind all of you that have been at Randolph in the past about StarLab. So even though we can't quite do StarLab in the same way as we're used to this year, Josh and I are going to work together here to try and make a little experience that reminds you of StarLab. If you have never been in StarLab before, it's basically a real planetarium that we were able to bring and set up in Randolph School. And so we learn a lot about stars and about constellations and about space science. Oh, there goes Orion is coming across. Who remembers Betelgeuse and Venus? And the other thing that we really love about StarLab is an opportunity to listen to myths that are hundreds and thousands of years old, star stories, and connect to those stories and to the stars and to the ancient people who told those stories. So even though this is very different than StarLab, I'm going to start by reminding you that two things about it are really the same. And the first thing that's the same is whenever I bring you friends into StarLab with me, my number one goal is that you are going to have thoughts and wonders and ideas and hear information that makes you enthusiastic to take that curiosity out into the real world and look at the real stars. So even though we can't be together right now, one part that is exactly the same as it ever was is that the goal here is to learn and wonder a little bit about the stars that is going to send you out of your house at night to look up and connect with the real stars. And that reminds me of one of my favorite things about stars, which is in fact the way that they connect us all. Humans looking at stars and noticing how beautiful they are and wondering about them has been a thing that we know has been happening ever since there were humans. So looking at stars can not only connect you to everyone else in the world right now who also can look up at night and see the stars, it can connect us to each other in that way. It can also connect you to every human that has ever lived before. And I think probably to all the humans who will come in the future. Because one thing that all humans do is look up and notice that stars are beautiful and wonder about them. So today we're going to start off by talking about a couple of stars and a couple of constellations that are called circumpolar constellations. And what that means is they are close to the North Pole, or to the North Star, I should say, and circle around it in a way that for us here in New York, we can always see them. At some time of night, we can always see them all around the year. So we are going to be looking at some constellations that are familiar, that are near the North Star, and that are visible to us at all different times of year. And in some other episodes after this one, we'll go to some different parts of the sky. One thing I just want to show you and mention briefly before I get started is this little nifty thing right here I'm holding. It's called a star finder. And I'm not going to get too in-depth about it, but what I want to let you know is this. It's very easy to find on the computer or to make your own or print your own or look up your own star finder. And it's simply a guide that helps you know at a certain time of year, at a certain time of night, what direction you can look to find real constellations in the real sky. So I can turn this little wheel here. This is one that came in a star book Emmett has, and we punched it out of the back. But it's easy to find one online. And it has a little wheel. We made this ourselves. We cut it out and made it. And I just turn it. And I'm going to turn it to May. And normally for now, at this time of year, you'd be looking at stars right before bedtime. So I'm going to turn it to 6 or 7 p.m. And then the other thing you need to know is which way is north, south, and east and west at your house. But now that I have this little wheel set up for this date for 6 p.m., I know that if I take Emmett and Reese out right at 6 or 7 in the evening when it's just getting dark, and I face to the north, let's see, east and west is here, I should be able to see Cassiopeia straight ahead of me in the north. Or if I look over to the west, I'm going to see Draco the Dragon at about 7 p.m., which is one of the guys we're going to talk about today. So it can be really tricky to take knowledge you've learned from a screen or a book and go out and find those real stars, but there are a lot of very simple tools that can help you. So if you look up a star wheel or a star finder on your computer with your grown-ups, you'll be able to find something like this that can help you. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to start off by talking about, oh, I forgot one more thing I wanted to mention. The other part that's different about this is that my favorite thing about teaching, whether I'm in StarLab or anywhere else, is that I'm with you and I can hear your questions and I can hear your wonders, and you can give me information that I didn't already have, or correct me when I make mistakes, or ask questions that help us all think about something really cool. So you can't do that right now because we're not actually together. You're going to watch this later. But what you can do is write those questions down, or have your parents email them to me, or share them in the future when we have live Zoom chats, and maybe down the road when we have a live star Zoom chat. So even though you can't shout out those questions to me in the moment, I want you to hold them and get them to me however you can, because that's always my favorite thing, to think about and respond to your questions or discover stuff together. So the last thing I'm going to say is that if this star field thing that you're looking at right now feels distracting or confusing, or if you get tired of it after a while and you'd rather just concentrate on the story, why don't you could do something like actually go outside at night and listen to this recording. Or maybe you can do what my kids love to do in your bedroom. You can make yourself a little pillow fort with a flashlight and make yourself, you pretend like you're looking at the night sky. So the goal here is to think about stars and wonder about stars and enjoy star stories. So if not looking at the screen is going to help you do that, totally, you should do that. All right, so let's start with probably the most famous and most easily recognizable pattern of stars anywhere in the north sky. I say pattern, it's not a whole constellation by itself. It's part of a bigger constellation. It's a pattern of stars that makes something that kind of looks like a scoop with a handle. And I'm sure that many of you at home right now are shouting out that you already know what I'm talking about. That's right, it's the Big Dipper, or at least that's one of the main names we know it by, the Big Dipper. And this is probably the one pattern of stars that just about every single person in the world has seen in real life at some point. So just like today, people for thousands of years, for as long as there have been people, have been really drawn to this pattern of stars and really interested in it. Josh is pointing to the stars now. You can see the part that's the Big Dipper. And you can also see the bigger constellation of, that's right, Ursa Major, which means the Great Bear. We'll talk a little bit more about the bear part after. First, we're going to talk about just the Dipper part. And the first story we're going to hear comes from here, from North America, the place that we're from. Native Americans have many, many wonderful star stories, and they have many wonderful Big Dipper stories. And there's all different stories about types of animals that the Big Dipper can be. In one story, the whole big thing is a bear, just like in the Greek version. In my favorite story, which you're going to hear down the road, my favorite star story, it's Fisher. It's the animal called Fisher. But today we're going to hear a story that comes to us from the Wasco tribe, the Wasco band of Native Americans, that tells us how the Big Dipper got there. And this story involves one of our favorite tricksters, Coyote. So you might know that there are many stories where Coyote uses his tricky powers and does something to make the world the way it is now. Sometimes he steals fire. Sometimes he teaches people how to fish. In this story, Coyote is going to give us the Big Dipper. And this story is called Coyote and the Five Wolf Brothers. So just sit back and listen. If you're looking at the stars, maybe try to imagine how these stars might represent the story. And then we'll tell you at the end. Okay. So once upon a time, there were 5 brothers named the Wolf Brothers who made their living by hunting deer. Every night while they were out hunting, they would make a campfire, cook some meat, and eat together. They shared their food with another man named Coyote. But this is not a regular old coyote. This was the first coyote. So he was a little bit more like a coyote god with superpowers and a trickster. This is the first coyote. So he used to follow the Wolf Brothers around. This is based on something that's true. Real coyotes follow wolves around and try to steal their meat sometimes. So in this story, it's saying that they share. Anyway, so after these Wolf Brothers would be done hunting and eating their deer meat for the day, they would relax in the evening, and every single night they would gaze into a specific part of the sky and look puzzled, like they were really wondering. And one night, Coyote asked the oldest brother, "What is it you are looking at?" And the oldest brother said, "I won't tell you, Coyote. You would think I was foolish. I don't want you to make fun of me." But on later nights, Coyote saw them doing it over and over, and he kept asking each of the brothers until one night they answered, "We think we can see 2 animals moving way up there in the sky, but they are so high up, we cannot tell what kind of animals they are." Well, Coyote was very curious about this. Coyotes are famous for being curious. And Coyote replied, well, wouldn't you like to go up there and get a closer look at them and see what they really are? And the brothers replied, oh, yes, very much, Coyote. We would love to, but no one can travel into the sky. And Coyote said, psh, pish posh, nonsense, it's easy. And right away, he proceeded to collect 3 quivers full of arrows. Quivers are those things like little round cylinder backpacks that archers carry to put their arrows in so you can reach over your shoulder. So Coyote went about collecting 3 quivers full of arrows. Then he took his first arrow. After he had collected all these arrows, he took an arrow and he shot it. He shot the arrow straight up into the sky towards the place where the brothers were looking at the stars. And the arrow went all the way up, 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 and it stuck into the sky. It didn't fall back down. It stuck straight up into the sky. Then Coyote shot a second arrow. And the second arrow stuck right into the back of the first arrow and connected. And then he shot a third arrow. Can you guess what happened? That's right. The third arrow connected straight into the second arrow. He shot his arrows all night long. And eventually there was a string of arrows reaching all the way from the sky down to the earth, like a chain, like a rope. So at dawn, the 5 brothers and Coyote began climbing the arrow ladder. The youngest brothers went first, and Coyote and the oldest brother, who was carrying their little hunting dog with him, went last. Remember about that little hunting dog, because there's a cool detail about that in the Big Dipper that we'll hear later. Okay, so now the brothers and Coyote and their hunting dog have climbed up the chain of arrows. It took them all day long, and finally, near the end of the day, they reached the skyland, and they found out what the 2 animals were. Does anyone have a guess what 2 big, powerful, cosmic animals up in the sky would be? Every time I ask this question, kids get it. Somehow you just know. It's deep knowledge. That's right. If you were guessing bears, you're right. These 2 animals that the Wolf brothers were looking at were grizzly bears, big, giant, powerful grizzly bears. So once they recognized this, the oldest brother, who was kind of the wisest and most cautious, he shouted, stay away, those space bears could tear you to pieces. But the younger brothers, who didn't want to appear afraid, who were very eager to seem brave, they started to creep closer and closer to the bears. The other brothers followed behind. Finally, the grizzly bears looked up and noticed the 5 wolf brothers. And there was a moment of fear, but the bears did not attack, for they had never seen people before, and they also were curious. So the bears just stood there looking at the brothers, and the brothers just stood there very still, looking back at the bears. They were kind of like having a staring contest. They were just frozen in wonder, looking at each other, the way we feel sometimes when we look at beautiful stars. So the bears are looking at the brothers are looking at the bears, and Coyote is looking at them all. And Coyote thinks to himself, what a funny and interesting picture these bears and wolf brothers make just staring at one another. I would like for everyone, for all time, including all of you, the kids at Randolph, far from now, I would like for them all to be able to see this picture in the sky, Coyote said. And so you know what he did? He just left them behind, and he proceeded to climb down the arrow ladder, taking out the arrows as he went, and made it back down to earth, leaving the picture there in the sky for everyone to see. So the next time you go out and look at the Big Dipper, you can say thanks to Coyote. Okay, now let's look at the Big Dipper and see the story. So first, Josh is going to point to the 2 stars that are making the scoop away from the handle. So not the handle and not the 2 stars near, those 2. So those 2 stars are 2 of the characters in the story. Can you guess who? That's right, those are the bears. Those 2 stars are the grizzly bears. Now let's point to the 2 stars on the other side of the scoop. Not in the handle yet, but on the other side. So now Josh is pointing to those 2 stars. Who was closest to the bear? That's right, those are the younger brothers who wanted to creep closer to appear brave. Okay, and then the 3 other further stars going back are the older brothers. So those are the wolf brothers. And if you look very carefully at the second star, you know, it's a little hard to notice here, but you'll notice it. So I want you to look now at the second star from the tip of the handle. So you can see Alcade there. Look at the one next to Alcade, that guy. All right, now move your arrow for a minute, Josh, because they have to look really closely. If you look really closely at that star, it kind of looks like it has a little lump next to it, almost as if it has a baby star coming off the Mizar. That's the one. Yes, Mizar means horse. So that is actually what's called a double star, because there is another star. There you go. Now you can really see it. You see how there's actually two stars? So what Josh is showing now is magnified. We can't see this with our eye. With our eyes, they look like one star. What it actually is two stars that are not that close together, but from our position on Earth, they look close. So does anyone remember that little detail in the story I told you to remember? That's right. That little star, the one that looks like a double star with Mizar, is the hunting dog. So now we see the grizzlies and the younger brothers and the older brothers, and we can see the little hunting dog next to Mizar being carried. And that's the story of Coyote and the 5 wolf brothers. So now that we've talked about that version of the Big Dipper, let's look at the Big Dipper as Ursa Major. So many of you will know that the Big Dipper is part of a bigger constellation that's a little harder to see, called Ursa Major, which means the Great Bear. Major means big or great, and Ursa means bear in Latin. Right now, we see her upside down. I say her because in the Greek myth, it is actually a woman named Callisto, and we'll talk about that in just a second. You can also see Ursa Minor. And before we talk about the bear constellations as such, let's talk about the way that we find Polaris, the North Star, and Ursa Minor by using Ursa Major. So everyone knows that there's such a thing as the North Star, and many of you might know that it's called Polaris. And many folks know that it's really important, or at least it used to be really important for navigating. It's the star that is kind of straight on line with the Earth's North Pole, at least right now. So for folks who can find it, you can find where north is by looking at the North Star. But the thing that surprises a lot of folks is that the Polaris is not so bright, not as bright as many other stars around it. So it can be really hard to spot from here on Earth, unless you know a little trick about the Big Dipper. So remember the 2 grizzly bears, the 2 stars that were at the end of the scoop of the Big Dipper? Those stars are called the pointer stars. Because if you imagine a straight line going through them, just like Josh is pointing to now, and then make that line keep going about 5 times the length of the line itself, it will get you almost right to that guy right there. That is Polaris, the pole star, the North Star. And Polaris is the tip of the handle of the Little Dipper, which is also the little bear, Ursa Minor. So when you remember about the Big Dipper, you can also remember that it's going to help you find the other constellations we're talking about today. Polaris, Ursa Minor, and Draco the Dragon, which we'll get to. Okay, so I've seen many different versions of a drawing of Ursa Major. Sometimes it looks just like this, with the bear having a really long tail and that sharp pointy nose. I've seen different versions. One of the things about constellations is that different folks have interpreted them different ways over time. And what's exciting about that is that also you are free to make your own drawing or your own image of these constellations. But I can tell you just kind of a short version of a story about Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. This is going to be a Greek story. So we're going to hear a few more tidbits today, and then lots in the next episode about Greek myths. Greek civilization, a couple of thousand years ago around the Mediterranean, and then Roman civilization was very important in history, and a lot of the myths and knowledge and science we have from today and language comes from those times. They were, of course, inspired by even earlier civilizations that came before them, including civilizations across the Mediterranean and Africa and Asia. So we'll try to mix in some of that knowledge, but you should know that in modern times in America, a lot of our star words and our myths and our constellation are based on Greek and Roman interpretations. Okay, so in Greek mythology, we have something called a pantheon, a whole big family of gods. Some of them are more powerful, some of them are less powerful, a lot of them are related to each other. And they live on a mountain up in space somewhere up in the sky called Mount Olympus. And the king of the gods is someone called Zeus. But one of the things about Greek gods that makes them interesting is that they are very curious about humans, just like how Coyote was curious about the wolf brothers. And the Greek gods like to, so here you're just seeing a quick example of a bigger sky field, and you can see some of the other Greek constellations like Gemini, the twins, and Cancer the crab, and Leo the lion. We'll spend lots more time visiting some of these friends in the future. But let me tell you about how Ursa Major and Ursa Minor got up in the sky. So, like I was saying, Greek gods like to come down to earth and kind of like play with humans, or sometimes mess with humans, or learn what humans are doing. So this guy Zeus, the king of the gods, was looking down on earth, and he saw this really powerful, impressive woman hunter, female human hunter. And her name was Callisto. And he would watch her at night. She liked to hunt at night and see that she was this really powerful, interesting, intriguing woman that was this brave hunter. And so Zeus kind of disguised himself as a human, and he would come down to hunt with Callisto. And they did this for quite a while, and eventually they had a son. Callisto had a baby boy named Arcus, and Zeus was the father of that baby. So at some point, Zeus's wife, his goddess wife, Hera, noticed that this was going on, and she was not pleased. So when Zeus wasn't looking, Hera used her powers to change Callisto, the woman hunter, into a big bear. So Zeus didn't know what happened, Arcus didn't know what happened, and Callisto couldn't talk. So they just thought that Callisto disappeared, but really now she was this great bear wandering around in the forests. She was sad, so she stayed away from people. But it turned out that Arcus, the son, grew up to be a great hunter, just like his mother. And one night he was out in the woods hunting, and he came across a great bear. And it turned out it was his mother, but he didn't know that. And his mother was so excited to see him that she started to run towards him, not realizing that he would be frightened. And Arcus was frightened, so he drew his bow to shoot his own mother, not knowing that that was her in the bear form. And Zeus looked down and noticed this, and he said, "Uh-oh." So he zoomed down really quick, and he intervened to save the situation. He got in between Arcus and Callisto, and he grabbed Callisto by her tail, and he swung her around and swung her all the way up into the sky. So that's why in this version of the constellation that you can see, she has a really long tail, much longer than you would normally expect on a bear. So Zeus took Callisto's bear form and put her up into the sky so that she could live forever and we could enjoy her beauty. And then he realized, he looked and saw how sad Arcus was about all this. So he took pity on Arcus as well and transformed him into another bear and swung him up into the sky so he could be together with his mother forever. So you can look at this now and see some bears that have really unusually long bear tails. And one explanation for that would be from Zeus swinging them around up into the sky and stretching out their tails. Okay, so now we've heard a little bit about the Big Dipper and Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. This is a great view right now, Josh, to look at what I want to say next, and then we'll start to focus on Draco. So the other thing, I keep doing it wrong. Sorry, Brad. Listen, guys, you got to help me with this. There's a Randolph rule. It's a tradition. I guess it's not a rule. It's a tradition. Whenever we talk about this next constellation I'm going to talk about, we have to say it in a voice that is worthy of this great, fearsome beast in the sky. So when we talk about this next constellation, we're not going to call him Draco the Dragon. We're going to call him Draco the Dragon. And I encourage you and invite you to try your best to say it that way as well and really think of him that way. Okay, so remember, we just learned about how Ursa Major can help us find Ursa Minor. The other, especially about how it can help us find Polaris, just like Josh is showing. The other great thing about that is while you're using the pointer stars from Ursa Major to go towards Ursa Minor, it's also helping you find the tip of the tail of, that's right, Draco the Dragon. So once you can find the Big Dipper on a clear night, you can also always find Polaris, Ursa Minor, Draco the Dragon. And if you keep going even further in that line past Polaris, it also will bring you to Cassiopeia, who is a constellation we will talk about in the next episode. So just by being able to find the Big Dipper, which all of us can on a clear night, you will always be able to find at least 4 awesome constellations: Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, Draco the Dragon, and Cassiopeia. It's a great start. All right, now, some of you might know a story that from Greek mythology about a hero named Hercules. In fact, Draco the Dragon can represent several different Greek myths where he is guarding some kind of treasure. There are many stories about Draco as a guard of something in Greek mythology. But What I have found interesting to know about Draco is that his story goes back to an even older uh, culture that kind of influenced and preceded the Greek culture, that is often referred to as Babylonian culture, kind of an early Middle Eastern Babylonian culture. And many Greek myths and even things like the Bible have influences from this ancient Babylonian culture. So in their starting story, it kind of starts the same way as many mythologies, where in the beginning, all that existed was a huge, endless ocean and a huge, endless sky, and no light, no stars, no land, nothing, just ocean and sky. And in this ancient Babylonian founding myth, there were two sets of gods who lived in this time of only earth and sky and darkness. There were the old gods and the young gods. And the old gods and the young gods started to really disagree with each other and have a big fight. The old gods thought that rather than create anything else or do anything else, it was time to just rest, time to just kind of like rest and go to sleep and relax for all eternity. But the young gods disagreed. They wanted to play. The young gods wanted to play and be active and create things and have adventures. So this argument got worse and worse until it actually became a battle. So the old gods sent their strongest member, their hero, Tiamat, to battle the hero of the young gods named Marduk. And the old god, Tiamat, took the form of, you guessed it, a huge serpent, a huge dragon. And the young god Marduk took a kind of like a big, heroic, giant human form. And they battled, and Marduk, the young god who wanted to create and play, won. So he wrestled Tiamat's serpent form and swung him and threw him up into the sky to remind people for all time of the great battle and how the young gods had created the kind of the next phase of existence. So another story about Draco the Dragon that's really ancient, maybe like 5,000 years ancient, is about how he was an old god that was defeated by a young god to make way for the new world. Okay, now something that I actually never knew until I was preparing this video for you right now. So it just goes to show you, even when we're on Zoom chat or whenever we revisit things in different ways, there's always an opportunity to learn. Really interesting. So I want to call your attention to a particular star in Draco, and it's the fourth star in from the tip of his tail. So if you start at the tip of his tail near the Big Dipper and go down 1, 2, I'm sorry, it's the third star in. It's the fourth star. So it's the fourth star, third star in from the tip. 2, 3. Yep, there we go. That guy right there. That star is named Subin. And by the way, I don't know if I'm pronouncing all these words right or not. Especially a lot of the stars are in ancient versions of Arabic language. So if anyone knows how to pronounce these better than I do, I'm always happy for that advice. But the way it looks to me, that star is called Subin. And check this out. It's so fascinating. So there's something called recession, which means that the tilt of the Earth's axis changes over time. You know that the Earth rotates around every day, 24 hours, and that the Earth is kind of influenced by gravity from the sun and from the moon and from other planets. So because of those gravitational changes over the course of thousands of years, the tilt of the Earth changes a little bit. And sometimes north is a little bit this way, and sometimes north is a little bit that way. So check this out. That star Subin that Josh is pointing to now that we were just talking about 5,000 years ago, that was the North Star. That was the pole star straight above the Earth's north axis. And in about 20,000 years from now, Subin will be the pole star again. So we can see Ursa Minor, and we can see where Polaris, the North Star, is now. So as Earth's axis changes over time, other stars in this little area become more close to where the North Pole is than Polaris. And this one, Subin, has been the North Star in the past and will be again. Isn't that fascinating? Okay, so I hope you learned or reminded yourself a little bit of what you already know about the stars and the myths connected to the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper and Draco the Dragon, and how the Big Dipper is this little kind of compass in the sky that helps us find all these other cool constellations. I hope that these stories and this information inspires you to go out and try to look at real stars, and or to try and learn more about stars on your own, or to send me questions you have about all of this. So just so you know what's coming up, and as soon as we're done putting this episode together, Josh and I are going to start working on another episode that is a favorite story for many folks. The story of Perseus, the hero, and Andromeda, the princess, and Cassiopeia, and Cepheus, the queen and king, and Cetus, the sea serpent. So that will be a whole episode to itself, and we'll spend more times with those awesome constellations. And I'm going to be putting some more stories together after that. And somewhere down the road, I want to try something that we've never actually tried before in StarLab, where we do something like this based on your ideas, your own constellations that you invent, your stories, your questions. And in particular, I would invite you to look at the Big Dipper just the way we're looking at it now, without the lines, without the drawings, without the pictures. If you can see it in the real sky, even better. And let your imagination play with that shape. And see if your mind suggests to you another idea for what that constellation could be. Maybe it's an animal, maybe it's an object. In China, they see it like a cart being drawn by horses. In some cultures, it's been seen as a gourd or a scoop or a noodle pot. So in between now and the next time we get together, see if you can spend a little time looking at and imagining about the Big Dipper, and just in your mind thinking of your own story. And I, or your teachers, I'm going to send you all out some materials that will help you kind of sketch and write about your own version of a Big Dipper story. And somewhere down the road, we're going to have a little StarLab episode like this, where instead of reading ancient myths, I'm going to read your myths. A myth by a neighborhood friend or a crow's nest friend, or maybe you can even read your myths yourself to each other. So in a time when we can't do everything the way we're used to, this is something that's making me really excited about a new thing we can try. So I hope this has been interesting and exciting for you. I hope that it inspires you to go out and look at real stars. Thanks to Josh for trying to make this StarLab-y kind of thing we're looking at here work the best as we can. And I really look forward to connecting with you some more over stars, and maybe by connecting with you when I don't even know it, because we're both outside looking at stars together at the same time. So until then, think starry thoughts and get outside when it's appropriate. Tell your parents that part of your homework is to stay up later than usual, or get up early. If you're like me, you might like to actually get up early in the morning and go out and look before the sun comes. And take it from there. And I can't wait to get back together with you soon with some more star stories. Bye, everyone.